right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today, I want to talk to you guys about the alchemy of evil, magical theories, and the inversion of God's uncreated energies. So today's stream should definitely be a fun one. It's actually got going from a private, what spawned today's conversation was a private conversation. And I was talking with Deanna, actually. She knows who she is. And we were discussing magic, gematria, sigil magic. How exactly does all these magical practices work? Because we as Orthodox Christians, we as Christians obviously believe that somehow they're efficacious. And that got me thinking, how exactly do they work? And so today's stream is a bit of a sort of theoretical conjecture on my part. This is not something you can just look up and find an answer for, of how exactly do we understand magic, the efficacy of magic, and its relationship to the uncreated energies. Why the uncreated energies are going to play such an important role in today's conversation. Because we as Orthodox Christians don't believe the opposite of God's energies have what we would call a positive existence in and of itself. Meaning love, logic, reason, truth. The opposite of these, so with truth, the opposite, falsity, is not a positive thing that is equal to truth. Instead, it is the absence of God's energy of truth. And so that got me thinking, well, with things like gematria and sigil magic and incantations, magical incantations, what exactly is going on? And so the premise, the thesis of today's video is that there has to be some sort of energetic basis in which all magic derives its efficacy from. I'm arguing that the way magic actually works, and again, this is the sort of theoretical conjecture for today's stream, is through the inversion of God's energies. It's through the sort of alchemical sublimations, the transmutations, the amalgamations, the petrifications, the distillation of God's energies into something that they are not. And this is important because, again, if we're dealing with the evil one, as you've heard me talk about in the Antichrist stream and the Lucifer stream, that he is, Lucifer, Satan, the evil one, devil, however you want to frame it, is the inverter. He is the father of lies. And given his free will choice to be in opposition to God and instead worship himself, well, by definition, he can't continually interact with the energies. Those have the presence, the uncreated presence of God himself inside those energies. And so I started thinking, well, maybe, just maybe what is going on is the inversion of God's energies. And so I want to talk to you guys about love. How is love, an uncreated energy of love? How do we understand that in a Christian context? And how exactly is that being inverted for an energetic purpose? That actually it has some sort of efficacy within society. And I want to get into potentially passionate eros versus the Christian understanding of true love and what true love is. We're going to talk about logic and reason. First of all, what are the difference between those things? Most people have a little bit of a trouble just describing that. So we're going to first differentiate logic versus reason, but then how, again, this is all being inverted. And the point that I'm going to begin with in today's stream is how society and the individual soul itself is undergoing an alchemical transmutation. An alchemical transmutation. And I'm going to go through and show you guys what are called the 7 steps of alchemy, the 7 stages of alchemy. And looking at this as a spiritual process, we first have to understand what alchemy is. Alchemy is more of a spiritual transformation than any sort of chemical process of changing lead into gold. Yes, there were charlatans. Yes, this is the common narrative when you look at alchemy as this sort of rudimentary, ignorant form of chemistry that would later get going post the Enlightenment, once, again, man understood the purpose of reason and worshipped reason itself. Now, I'm going to argue today that as we near the end times, whenever that may be, who knows, again, we can push that back through our own individual and then collective repentance. We can push that time back. But I'm arguing that what we are going through is an alchemical transmutive process. And so again, I want to walk you through those stages and what alchemy is, and then look at the transmutation of God's energies and how magic works. That magic has to work off the uncreated energies of God, because that's the only thing that has ultimately a positive existence, and therefore the opposite of it, not being and having a positive existence, must transmutate it somehow, some way. So when we look at things like logic or language and numbers, again, magic itself is based on this really important central concept that language is a sort of defining characteristic of humanity itself. Same within our own theology. Same in our Christian understanding of the eternal Word of God and how God created creation. And so when we think about then the wizard, the magician, the witch, the warlock, these people are sort of faux representations, inverted, sublimated forms of who Christ is, the ultimate eternal Word of God. And so they participate in the uncreated energy of language, mind you, by subtly inverting it. That language itself has supernatural powers to a degree. That numbers themselves do have a sort of supernatural power. This is why gematria is a magical process, is and has a form of efficacy to it. This is how you stand inside your pentagram and you can actually conjure spirits. That somehow man, humankind, being able to participate in the language, the uncreated energy of language itself and numbers, can invert these things. And that is what I started thinking, and it took me a while to connect all this stuff. I mentioned I wanted to do this topic, but that, I believe, is how magic works. That all magic, in some way or another, is an inversion of God's uncreated energies. And so that's why I'm saying this. You can't look up an article. I was trying to find something. I didn't find any Orthodox article talking in this way. I couldn't find any Christian theological article. That this is something that I've kind of thrown together. So it's speculative. Again, this is theoretical conjecture on my part. I'm going to say that from the beginning. So we're not going to be referring to any clergy or church fathers for today's stream. This is sort of a puzzle piece that maybe I feel like I've put together, and I just want to throw this out there for you guys to get feedback from the community and see, well, maybe he has something here. Maybe this idea is worth sharing. Maybe it's not. Maybe you guys will have a lot of criticisms, but I feel like it's worth getting into. So that's what we're going to be discussing today, is the alchemy of evil. What is magic? How does magic work? Language and symbols, how society itself and the individual soul, the personal soul of each person, is the spiritual war, is fighting against an alchemical transmutation. And we're going to describe then the 7 stages of alchemy, and how, again, once we understand those processes and those stages of alchemy, we can then look at what's happening in society and say, wow, maybe this is exactly what the stages of processing, the stages of transformation, which is described as a spiritual transformation. Again, alchemy, when we're dealing with this stuff, this magical understanding, only the materialistic rationalist, wants to use these, they're trying to transfer lead into gold. Okay, great. Anybody who practices alchemy, any self-professing alchemist or magician, they don't believe it that way. And so we always have to steel man whoever we're talking about. So I have a couple articles that we're going to look at. Again, people who profess to be alchemists, who promote alchemy and magic and all this different stuff. So yeah, the framework they're going to use certainly isn't our criticism, but we need to steel man their argument. We need to know what they're saying in their own terms. So then I, and hopefully, can do a good job of talking about the inversion of God's energies. And so the energies I want to discuss are love, logic and reason, how's that being inverted for a magical purpose? Language and numbers, how that's inverted for a magical purpose. Light, how that's inverted for a magical purpose. Beauty, how that's inverted for a magical purpose. And the moral good. So we got 6 uncreated energies that we're going to be diving into. And again, you could do this for all the energies. I just have a little bit of a time constraint today. So being Wednesday, some of you guys know that we have our class, our theology class with my parish led by Subdeacon Mark. And so that always begins at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I do have to hop out of here before probably 6:30. 6:30 is probably where I'm going to be winding down today's stream. So it's not going to be a 3-hour stream, not going to be a 4-hour stream. I do have a tons of energy. That could be from the 5-hour energy shot earlier, but it is going to be jam-packed. Today's stream will be jam-packed with things. Hopefully it's insightful. And then I got to hop out so I can help Subdeacon Mark with the theology class we do again every Wednesday night. And again, I'm just throwing this out there, that if some of you would like to participate potentially in our theology course, I will be posting that Zoom link in my Telegram group chat. So if you're in the Telegram group chat, you will have an opportunity to join this evening's theology course. I ask only that you realize you're coming there to listen. Just listen. Now, we've done 2 weeks now where we've had open invites to anybody in the group chat. They could come in, and it's worked out really well. So if you would like to, again, we'll be posting the link to the theology class led by Subdeacon Mark, and I help him with it. We do it through an online Zoom meeting. That will begin at 7 p.m. tonight Eastern Standard Time. It's free. As long as you're in my group chat, you'll have access to the link. But again, I ask that nobody's asking you to come there to teach. Nobody's asking you to come there and give your opinion. That it's if you're interested in learning more about Orthodox theology in a fun setting, you can participate in our theology course every Wednesday night. And we just ask that you be respectful, that you don't be, arrogant or ignorant or obstructive in any way, but you let the people, again, we've been doing this for over a year. So this is just now the first time where Subdeacon Mark and I are offering, again, open access to the public to join us. So if that is something you might be interested in, you can join the Telegram group chat. The Telegram group chat. Now, if you don't know how to get to the Telegram group chat, I probably should share the link tree so you guys can. So let me grab my link tree link real quick. And if you guys want to, there is my link tree link. Again, that is for all my social media. You can see that I have my Telegram page there, and then I have my Telegram group chat page as well. So if you want to potentially join our Zoom meeting this evening at 7 o'clock p.m. Again, we ask only serious inquirers about Orthodoxy. This is not a time to talk about any other topics other than Orthodox theology. You may join. You may join for free. It's open to anybody. We just ask, again, that you be extremely respectful to who is leading it and how we've been doing it for the last year and a half. Also, before we dive into today's stuff, I want to say thank you, everyone who's gone over to the website and become website members. Again, the second half of last stream, The Ancient Roots of Western Magic, is up over at the website for members. You can always check that out, along with my Trad Forum speech. If you'd like to hear my Trad Forum speech, that is also up over at the website, along with a bunch of other content. And I realized what I'm going to start doing over at the website is I don't have to worry about copyright strikes on my website content because it's all private behind a paywall and it's not uploaded to YouTube. So I'm going to start doing a bunch of review streams, watching things that would be copyrighted, things I can't do on YouTube that are copyrighted. We're going to be doing those over at the website for members. So I know Friday I'm going to be doing a stream on Timothy Leary. And so for members only, we'll have a whole video full of other videos of Timothy Leary talking, reflecting on it, discussing different stuff he says that would probably get copyrighted here on YouTube. So that's going to be over again at the website for members only, if that would be something you'd be interested in. And of course, if anybody would like to set up a one-on-one session, we've been having great sessions with everybody. It's always fun to meet people. But if you'd like to talk about theology, philosophy, theories of magic, world religions, fitness, diets, whatever, goal setting, feel free to sign up at davidpatrickcarey.com/shop/one-on-one education and consulting, and you can set up you can purchase, and then I'll email you to set up a day and time and ask what topics you're interested in, and we can get into anything and everything you might desire. So that concludes, again, the housekeeping's the same old rigmarole each week. You know how it is. But if you guys you like the streams, you see that I'm hustling. I'm always putting out new content. I'm busting, working, trying to stream, trying to put out some unique ideas out to the ether, the collective web. becoming a website member is a great way to support, and again, you'll get access to exclusive content in doing so. So thank you very, very much to everyone who has already do that. I truly appreciate it, and God bless. All right, now let's get into today's topic. Now, like I said, alchemy, the alchemy of evil. So the things that I want to get into today is, how does magic work? Why is it efficacious? And so I decided, or I thought about this, and I came to the conclusion that the only way magic rituals, magic processes, sigil magic, chaos magic, magical incantations, gematria, the only way this stuff could ultimately work or be efficacious is if it has some sort of energetic process. We know the law of thermodynamics. There has to be some type of energy behind all this stuff. And so it quickly came to me that it has to be God's energies. It has to be from an Orthodox perspective. You've heard me say this over and over again, but for anybody who might be new that needs to hear this, from an Orthodox perspective, the opposite of God's energies do not have a positive existence. The same thing with evil. Right, I've heard too many, just recently, I just did a stream on how we as Christians don't believe in dualism, and I just heard somebody, Christian online, just flipping through, talking about a dualistic fight between good and evil. That is not the case. What it is, evil is the absence of God. Evil is the absence of truth, the absence of the good. That is what it is by definition. The same thing as cold is the absence of heat. So when we look at how magic would work, it has to work off something that's positive and objective in the world. It has to be God's energies. And so it's through the inversion of God's energies. It's through a sort of magical, or what I'm describing today as an alchemical process, a transmutive process, that magic gains its efficacy, that the energetic processes in magic itself are the inversion of God's energies. And so when we look at language and symbols, one of the easiest ways to talk about magic is something like sigil magic. And so I've talked about this previously, that back in the day when I was into some of this stuff, I was interested in sigil magic. And I remember watching a speech by the gentleman Grant Morrison. So some of you guys know who he is, a comic book writer, and he is a noted magician. And Grant Morrison used to talk about how to create sigils and sigil magic and how it worked in his life. Now, a sigil, if you're not familiar with what sigil magic is, it's basically recapitulating the creative process of God. And so how does God create in an Orthodox or a Christian standpoint? God speaks the world into existence. According to John 1:1, he does this through the Logos, the eternal Word of God. The Alpha and the Omega, both are letters, the beginning and end of the Greek alphabet, also symbolizing that he's the beginning and the end, but also highlights that somehow he's related to the alphabet, somehow he's related to language himself. And so Grant Morrison would talk about how you create these sigils. And so I performed these a couple times, and they turned out to work. So I don't know if I've ever talked about this in a stream, but I think I've highlighted how the sigil magic works. But basically what it is say you have a desire. Say that your desire is, it has to be something within the realm of possibilities. You can't say, I want to win the lottery, and you don't buy a lottery ticket, and you go, and you're just expecting something to fall in your lap. That's not how this stuff works. It's a combination of one's own will, one's own desire, and then the supernatural. This is how magic works. So if you're going to create what's called a sigil, say your goal is to make an extra $1,000 at the end of the month. And I'll tell you what, this is actually the one that I did. For the first one that I did, I practiced sigil magic. This was well before, this was back when I was doing my master's program. I remember trying this out for the first time. And what you do is you write a sentence of your highest desire. So for me, it was, my highest desire is to have an extra $1,000 at the end of this month. And you write that whole thing out, and then you go through and you mark out all the vowels. Why do you mark out the vowels? Because the vowels are only phonetic, right? Vowels contain no meaning. The meaning of words are only found in the consonants. That's why if you actually look at a paper and somebody marks out all the vowels, you can pretty much still read most of the words. Why? Because it's the consonants that hold the meaning. And so you go through, you have this sentence, it's my highest desire to have an extra $1,000 at the end of the month. You mark out all the vowels. Now you have a list of all these consonants. Now you mark out all the consonants that repeat. Now you have probably a number of consonants somewhere between 12 and 20. Now the magic begins, and you start to create some type of image where all the consonants, all the symbols, all the letters that are right there in front of you, the 12 to 20 consonants, you now put inside a symbol, some type of symbol. And the symbol should not look anything like your desire. It should not look anything like what you're talking about. It should be something totally different. But now, this is the recapitulation. This is the representation of the creative process of God, is that now you've taken your desire that exists where? Where does your desire exist? Inside yourself. And so you've taken this ethereal desire and you've made it two-dimensional. Because now the symbol, whatever symbol you've drawn, may, again, look crazy. You won't even understand what it is. That symbol now contains the entirety of that desire. And now you can do what's called charging it. And you can charge the sigil. There's different ways you can charge it. You can charge the sigil by putting it in a place where a lot of people see it. I would say and speculate this is what the majority of corporations do, that many of their logos are a form of magical sigil, and the more that people observe it, the more they believe that it's charged. So within the magical worldview, the sort of magical psychological context for all this stuff is that you want to get this sigil deep into the recesses of the subconscious mind. And so you do that by, if more people look at it, whether they are consciously looking at it or not, that they will get it embedded in their subconscious mind, and that's going to help it fruition quicker. Also, you can do it by putting it in like obscure places around your room. Put it on your ceiling, put it on the walls. And so when you, again, see it subconsciously, you will, again, embed that into your subconscious. Now, the way that I charged it, and this is, again, I'm not making this stuff up. This is how, again, maybe I was a little bit more degenerate back in the day. I'm honest about that. Is that you actually look at it while having an orgasm. So again, within a lot of this magical theory, this is why sex magic is so powerful. Look at the Kama Sutra over in India, that during orgasm, the right and left hemispheres are fused, right? That the corpus callosum, the anatomy of the brain that fuses the two hemispheres, that during the point of orgasm, both hemispheres are active. And again, if you listen to some of these magical people, they will say, well, this is why we get the whole motif and the legends of women whispering things in a man's ear during orgasm. Because you can sort of implant, the idea is that you can implant things into the subconscious mind most easily during the point or peak of orgasm. And so, again, according to Grant Morrison, back when I was interested in this stuff, trying to figure out if it's real or not, you can do something and then you masturbate. And then when you get to the point of orgasm, you stare at the sigil. You stare at the sigil. The sigil looks nothing like what the desire was. And in fact, it's best or most efficacious if you actually forget what the sigil was for. And then it can be implanted into your subconscious mind. You go about your day. You're supposed to forget it, trying to achieve this thing. And for me, I got my $1,000, and this was towards the end of my my master's degree. And I remember that working and being a little intimidated by it, not sure what to think. Again, this is before getting into Christianity and repenting for much of this stuff, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of you guys participated in similar activities. Because when you get into the New Age or the occult, eventually you're going to come across this stuff. Again, the law of attraction. The law of attraction is another one. And again, even in regards to the law of attraction, I was thinking about that. I'll jump ahead, actually, from what I was going to say earlier. The law of attraction speaking the things that you want into existence and all this different stuff. Well, to a degree, again, as Christians, we can understand that there is a sort of reality to speaking things into existence. There is now, again, we are not promoting the law of attraction whatsoever, but how do we communicate to God? Through language, in prayer. And so you may ask for something, but in a Christian context, we're always submitting to God's will. So you may want something, but you have to be at a point in which you ultimately want God's will to be done more so than whatever desire you have. And then if he deems it necessary or useful for you to have that thing, you can have it. But it's like we're using language. We're using the eternal word of God. We're using the Alpha and the Omega, again, to commune back to the Trinity, back to the Godhead. And so magic and sigil magic is using that same mechanism. It's still using language. It's still using meaning and syntax and letters and numbers. But it's not to, again, appeal back to God's will. It's not to give God full control over it. It's for me to sort of hijack, again, these uncreated energies, these positive energetic processes, these divine energies for my own purpose. And that is why it's so pernicious and so evil. You may think, well, I know this witch or this guy and he does some of it, but he's such a nice person. Could be. But magic at a fundamental level is so evil because what it's doing is literally inverting God's energies for the fulfillment of your own desires. What could be more evil than that? That God gives you something that is uncreated. And because you're made in the image of God, you're actually allowed to participate in those things. You're actually allowed to participate in them. We actually participate in language. We actually participate in truth and logic and reason and all these different things. But magic is a sort of inverting of these things so I can attain the things that I want. And so the inversion of the word and the logos of God. I think this is the basis of magic. And I couldn't help when I thought about this as you think of the Gandalf figure, think of the Merlin archetype and most of these sort of contemporary modern fantasy films where magic is somehow of great importance. And the wizard is always a sort of faux form of Christ. Now he's this old man archetype, but he's a sort of faux figure of Christ, the healer, the wisdom figure, the truth teller, the one with supernatural capabilities, the one who comes and saves everybody in the last minute. It's a sort of inversion of Christ. And the practice of magic and wizardry and witchcraft and alchemy and all this stuff is the inversion of the logos, the word of God itself. So I kind of put that dot together and thought, that might be worth sharing. And so, again, it makes sense. Because if magic is evil, if magic, as the Bible talks about, tells you not to participate in it, that in some way it has to be related to the inversion. And who is the inverter? It's always Satan, Lucifer, the devil, the evil one. He cannot create. You see, he can't ultimately create. Because to fully create, as you and I can do, to create like a man who loves a woman and they actually have children, to create in the way in which God intended creating, that is a recapitulation and an image of the Trinity itself. Satan can't do that. Satan can only invert, distort, and manipulate. And so if magic is still working, it has to be a sort of inversion, a distortion, and a manipulation of the creative processes themselves, of the creative divine energies of God themselves. And so, again, he's still the father of lies. He's still the head of the magical, the alchemical process. It's still ultimately serving the evil one. And so, society itself, then, I think it's useful to see how we have been undergoing an alchemical process of transmutation. That when you ask an alchemist, what exactly are you doing? That what they're doing is using matter, the matter of this mundane world, to symbolize their own spiritual transmutation, the transformative process of being who they thought they were at the beginning of the alchemical process to be the rarefied gold at the end of the process. And so within alchemy, then you see the androgyny, the hermaphroditic tendencies. Even though it's easy to get swept up in this stuff, especially when you're when you're less sophisticated about theology or philosophy or the world of ideas, or if you haven't built a real relationship with Christ and the Holy Trinity. But society itself is going through the same alchemical process that the alchemist is said to have done, that you change who you are. Again, you are that base lead who's going to be made into that rarefied gold. However, again, much of the symbolism of alchemy is androgyny, hermaphroditic, the combination, the unification of the male and the female, right? Again, because the alchemist is almost perfecting what God didn't perfect. Right? Oh, well, we have male and we have female. Well, I'm going to combine the two. This, again, you can see is a feedback loop, another recapitulation of Lucifer's fall himself. So the first thing that I want to show you guys then is what is the 7 stages of alchemy? The 7 stages of alchemy. So let me pull this up real quick. And I want you to then think, as we read through the 7 stages of alchemy, think about how this applies to society as a whole, and think how it applies to individual persons in society. And then as we go through this, reflect on where you're at, your own journey, how Christ saved you, how you're here. Again, it tends to start making a lot of sense. So number 1 is calcination. So these are the 7 stages of alchemical transformation, This is what every alchemist is trying to do. Step 1 is the initial phase in the 7 steps of the alchemical transformation. Chemically, the calcination process involves heating a substance in a crucible over an open flame until it is reduced to ash. Psychologically, this process represents the destruction of the ego and our attachments to the material world. Now, here's another article where we can read a little bit more about it. And so, calcination. What? Again, this is a website for alchemists promoting alchemy and its various ideas and practices. And it says, in alchemy, this is depicted as the burning of the prima materia into ash. This stage refers to the breaking up of our attachments to the worldly along the journey of life. It's easy to get lured into the rat race. We seek wealth, but also status, fame, prestige, the things to feed our ego and our own perceptions of our identity. These things can be beneficial, but the larger of a figure it plays in our lives, the more we chase it, and the more it can consume us. The break with the worldly can come to us in something as sudden as a traumatic event like a loss, or it can come gradually over time through the suffering we experience in life, or even when we get all the things that we could ever want, but without feeling a true sense of fulfillment. This stage asks to humble ourselves. Fire sparks the journey into the self. And so, again, this stuff is going to sort of be subtle distortions of Christianity, subtle distortions of things that we would actually believe in. Now, when it talked about calcination as the burning of prima materia, or the heating up process, I couldn't help but think that so again, the Great Reset, this is the premise of today's stream, is that the Great Reset is an alchemical process. And for the beginning of the Great Reset, they have to heat the petri dish up. They have to heat it up. Just like this article said, chemically, the calcination process involves heating a substance in a crucible, in a particular petri dish, in some type of container, over an open flame until it is reduced to ash. Psychologically, this process represents the destruction of the ego and our attachments to the material. Is that what 2020 was? Is that what the beginning? Again, you could look at all the 20th century as slowly heating up. It's slowly deteriorating. Again, we're like the frogs being slowly boiled, right? That metaphor, how the animal the lobster, the frog, it gets in the water and it's kind of lukewarm at first. Maybe it's cold, and they slowly warm the water up. Slowly warm the water up, slowly but surely. Is this the whole process of the 20th century? And then the 20th century process ends in 2020 with, again, the pandemic. And now, again, the psychological process represents the destruction of the ego and our attachments to the material. Because when I look at this destruction of the ego, it's going to play back into my inversion on logic and reason, because I'm going to argue that many people have lost their ability to actually critically think, and therefore all they refer back to is the collective hive mind. The collective hive mind, which again is ruled by the globalist structure. And so the collective hive mind, to get back, to make that your default program, I think, again, is part of this destruction of the ego and the attachments to materials. When we look at the Agenda 21, that you're not going to own anything and you're going to like it. You're not going to own a damn thing and you're going to love it. You're going to live in your little tiny house. You're going to eat insects. Is this the first process? Is this the first step in the transformation of the actual soul of individuals in the world? The transformation to make one more subservient to the coming Antichrist? I don't know. But it makes a little bit of sense here. It makes a little bit of sense. Now, as they've heated up the society, as they began the psychological process, as they burn down what was previously there, again, so step one's about heating up. What happened last summer? Well, we had quite a heating up. We had multiple cities around the United States literally be on fire due to protest. That definitely weren't organized by Soros or his money, I'm sure. So step one seems to be one of which we've already sort of encountered, the calcination process. And so what comes after everything's been heated up? What comes after the psychological ego has been destroyed and people's connection to the material becomes less? Like owning land, like owning a home, like protecting your family, right? No, you don't need any of these things. You don't need these material things that are going to be necessary for you to actually fulfill the Christian lay life, right? The family life within a Christian context. So what comes next? What's the second step? Well, the second stage in the alchemical transformation is the dissolution process. So what's the dissolution? The second phase involved dissolving the ashes from calcination. Chemically, it is the dissolving of ash in water. Psychologically, it represents the breaking down of artificial structures and the unconscious, rejected parts of our psyche. It is a process in which our conscious mind lets go of control in order to allow the deeper hidden aspects of the self to surface. Interesting. When I read this and I see the breaking down of artificial structures, well, I immediately think of critical theory. You can think of critical race theory. That's a hot buzzword right now, critical race theory. But everything in the sort of evil context is a cultural construction. It's all an artificial construction. And so what is the sort of the logical basis for the multiplicity of genders, for men giving birth, for all this different, again, category errors, the dissolution of the logical categories themselves, which if you can look up, I'm not making this up, guys. Just Google logic is racist, logic and white supremacy. You're literally going to find articles from PhDs saying that the emphasis of logic and logical consistency is tied to a history of European white supremacy. Not kidding. So then, as we'll see, that logic itself being an uncreated energy in which we actually come to recognize truth, it itself has to be destroyed. Is that part of the dissolution process of stage 2 in the alchemical transformation? I'm not sure, but it kind of makes, again, a little bit of sense. And so this article here, when we read about dissolution, the chemical process of dissolution is to take the ashes from calcination and dissolve it in water. Here, we are plunged into the waters of the unconscious. When you are primarily driven by ego, as one is prior to undergoing the journey into the spiritual, we may have buried parts of ourselves in order to create an image of what our identity is, meaning your fake identity, meaning the identity that culture wants you to have, right? Again, this fake one. So your true self, your hermaphroditic, I identify as a fur baby. That I also identify as multilingual. I saw one guy now identify as Korean, that he literally, some British dude literally had cosmetic surgery to look Korean. And now he's wanting to add like transracial to like the LGBTQ stuff. What the hell is going on? I would say, again, this is stage 2 of the dissolution process, that the cognitive categories are dissolved. And so now, literally, the worst parts of the subconscious, the most animalistic dimensions of humanity are being able to be released. They're being able to come to the fore now. And so it is in this stage that we must unearth those parts of ourselves, the parts of us that we have rejected. I wonder if that's, again, why the white man rejected you being a hermaphroditic lesbian. Whether they are perceived faults or painful memories or traumatic upbringings, the water in this stage asks us to let go and to release the structures and the systems that define our perceptions of ourselves. Interesting. So again, for me, I couldn't help but think about this dissolution process, stage 2 in the alchemical transformation, as hinting at, again, what's going on in our society right now. So once everything's been heated up, and then they can be redissolved, so all those conceptual categories can be dissolved, what comes next? The separation, stage 3. Let me get over here. Stage 3 is the separation process. And the third phase in the alchemical transformation. Chemically, it is the isolation of the components of dissolution by filtration and then discarding unworthy material. Psychologically, this process is the rediscovery of our true essence. Oh, okay. The previously rejected parts of the rational mind. It is a conscious process in which we embrace our shadow self, so we can decide what to discard and what to integrate into our personality. Now, the shadow self, they're using Jungian terminology, Jungian psychological terminology there. So the separation process then is once you've dissolved all the categories, right? All these cultural constructions, all these artificial distinctions, once they've been dissolved, now you can separate. Now you can choose what you want to integrate, specifically the darker aspects of ourselves, that we need to integrate these darker aspects and re-understand our true identity. Now, what this article says, in this stage, the alchemist separates and filters the products of dissolution. Now that we have unearthed the unconscious materials that we have discarded, we can also now sift through it, really to find parts of it that can help us grow. What parts of you have you rejected, that you have hidden from the world, can actually make you stronger? I.e., if you're a man, you're probably a homosexual, and see all that resistance against being sodomized by another man. This is because you haven't actually integrated into your shadow self yet. You see, your resistance to it, this is a problem. This is a problem. This means that you're fighting yourself. So how can these parts of the self, which may be considered by the rational mind worthless or weak, bring joy to others? How can we incorporate this narrative that was once so painful to you into the greater arc of your story? On the flip side, you also have to be honest about what parts of your shadow legitimately hold you back, and work to discard those habits, emotions, memories, or narratives from your identity. So again, you see how so much of the alchemical processing, and we'll do deeper dives. This is, again, a very rudimentary, surface-level discussion of alchemy, generally speaking. I'm using it much more in a sort of pop cultural context here, talking about the Great Reset in society itself. Eventually, again, we'll do some more streams getting into Paracelsus, Jakob Burma, some of the great alchemists, are considered great alchemists of the the 16th century and things of that nature. So then we'll get more academic, more scholastic in our discussion of alchemy. But today's more just about a sort of collection of ideas that I've put together. I'm trying to lay them all out in front of you guys to see if they make sense and they connect dots like I feel like they do for me. So this third step is separation, and this is really the integration of the new identity that you once thought you were rejecting or resisting, that now you're embracing and identifying with. And so we have the calcination, the dissolution, the separation, and this leads us to the fourth one. The fourth one, which is the conjunction, is the fourth phase. Chemically, it is the recombination of the saved elements from separation into a new substance. Psychologically, it is the birth of our true self, the divine union of opposites. Aha! There it is. The divine union of opposites. Meaning, again, when you look into the iconography and the semiotics of alchemy, you're going to see a lot of hermaphrodism. You're going to see a lot of Baphometic-esque type of content, where you see, again, Baphomet being the horned male deity with female breasts. That you see a lot of this stuff in alchemy. Again, these weird kind of mind-bending images. What is all this coming from? Well, could it be, again, part of the same spiritual war, the same spiritual activity from the beginning? And that alchemy, again, is just another way in which the slow subversion of truth leads people back towards really an inverted worldview. And so the conjunction, what's this article say about the conjunction? Here, the alchemist combined the new elements deemed worthy in separation into a new substance. It is at this moment where we reintegrate. Unconscious and conscious come together. At this stage, though we are aware of the social structures that are at play in the world and that have fed the ego, we are not influenced by them. We are free. Here, the alchemist is at peace with both the perceived darker aspects of the self and the mask that they need to wear when interacting with the world. Yes, exactly. So, step 4 then insinuates there's a sort of power in integrating the dark aspects of oneself into their own identity. And then consciously, again, because the mask comes from the term persona back in Greece, that has to do with, it's a sort of altered persona, the mask that people put on when they're in plays and stuff like that. So the mask is not, you are never your true self. This is insinuating you can't really show the world your true self. But you, in the fourth stage of the alchemical transformation, you have reintegrated all the darker aspects, those aspects that Christian-dominated society doesn't want you to express. They don't want you to be your true self. We want you to be your true self. And so conjunction then is the sort of recapitulation, the recrystallization, the amalgamation of oneself. And this leads to the next stage, the fifth stage. The fifth stage is the fermentation stage. It is the fifth phase in the alchemical transformation. Fermentation is a two-step process that ultimately leads to a new level of being. Chemically, fermentation is the growth of bacteria in an organic solution. Psychologically, the fermentation process starts with the divine inspiration and synchronicities. Fermentation can be achieved through intense prayer, deep meditation, breath work, or with psychedelic plants. Fermentation is living from intuition and knowing when to take inspired action, when learning to trust and connect to something totally beyond the physical. And so here, I couldn't help but think when I read about the fermentation is one of the big differences in Orthodox spirituality. This is even true with Orthodoxy versus Catholicism, and I think I mentioned this in my last stream, is the role of the imagination. And so we as Orthodox are always cautioned to not focus on the emotions and the imagination as a pietistic mode towards God, because it is through the imagination where we encounter the logismy. That is the epicenter of the spiritual war. That is where all sin begins. It begins first with a mental image. This is, again, according to the church fathers, according to the Orthodox tradition, this is the battlefield. The battlefield is your imagination. The imagination is everything, because where the imagination goes, that's where, again, your emotions are going to go, your feelings are going to go, your logic, your perception, all this stuff is going to follow. It's going to follow the imagination. And so this fermentation process, talking about how intense prayer, deep meditation, breath work, and psychedelic plants, there's actually a stream that I want to do in the future talking about the dangers of meditation and how many people have actually ruined their lives doing, getting into these deep meditative processes, and again, allowing their imagination to take over and then following that imagination, and how that's led to very dark places in their life. How, again, from an Orthodox perspective, that is not what you should be doing, because that's how you're going to be led astray. And that's also why psychedelic substances can be so dangerous, because the beauty of them is, of course, what's happening in your imagination. The colors, the structures, the patterns, the intensity, the emotions, all this stuff is crescendoing at a new level during those peak experiences, and it is passionate and pleasurable. But that's also where we encounter the spiritual warfare, and we have to be very, very, very careful. And so the fermentation process, this process in the alchemical transformation, is trying to get you to connect with the non-physical by focusing on how you feel and focusing on what you imagine. Both of which, again, Orthodox Christianity would caution very strongly against both of those. And so this article on the fermentation reads, bacteria and other living organisms are introduced to the substance to continue its breakdown. Fermentation is essentially all about testing this newly integrated self. We test ourselves through trials and tribulations, through the natural swings of life provide us. All the pain, the hurt, is something that pushes the self to becoming more resilient. True. And to be stronger. Very true. The idea here is that we must go through the darkest of the night in order to see the dawn, and when it arrives, it brings with it something explosively beautiful. Interesting. Now, I personally like the other description a little bit more on this article because it's talking more about the spiritual practices, again, in the psychological transformation. That it's now about, you've already reintegrated, you've already dissolved who you used to be, you heated it up, you dissolved it, you got rid of all those categories, you've integrated the dark aspects of yourself. Now it's about this new self going out and exploring the world, or getting back in contact with the non-physical world, right? Again, as this article says, learning to trust and to connect something totally beyond the physical. But how do you know what that non-physical thing is? Is it from God? Is there good and evil? Is any of these things going on in the alchemical mind? These questions aren't too important for him. And so this leads to the next stage, which is the distillation process. It is the sixth phase in alchemy. Chemically, it is the boiling and condensation of a fermented solution to increase its purity. Psychologically, distillation is the agitation and sublimation of psychic forces to ensure that no impurities from the inflated ego are incorporated into the next and final stage. Personal distillation consists of a variety of introspective methods that help shift our level of consciousness and ultimately changes our perception of reality. Distillation is the purification of the unborn self, our highest potential, free from emotions and egoic attachments. And I've talked about this again in multiple New Age, the occultism, ancient illuministic spiritual traditions, about this cosmic self, the true self, right? You're not your unique person. That's an illusion, and that's part of your ego. You see, you've totally inflated yourself. Oh, you think you're made in the image of God? Oh, gosh, what an idiot. No, you have a true self. You have a true cosmic self. You need to get rid of that unique person and realign with the cosmic self. And so this is the distillation process. So in here, distillation is the solution. In distillation, the solution is then boiled and condensed in order to purify the substance. To prepare for the final stage, we need to purify the spirit and make it sure that it is free from any destructive forms of the ego. Here, we are planting the seed of the unborn, the transpersonal self.
one that is free from the distinctions of the collective and the individual. To help it grow, one has to nourish it, which can be done with various forms of contemplation, spiritual ritual, and meditation. So, again, this distillation process is about that cosmic self. Again, the new transformation is realizing that little itty-bitty unique person you thought you were, that was a lie the whole time. Sorry to break it to you. You're really this big cosmic self, and you need to realign with it. You need to realign with it. And so, again, personal distillation consists of a variety of introspective methods that can help shift our consciousness and ultimately change our perception of reality. Distillation is the purification of the unborn self, our highest potential, free from emotions and egoic attachments. And I don't have it here, but there's multiple, because I was searching for multiple articles here. And in this distillation process, so again, you can imagine, I've already done a video on the cosmic Christ nonsense, but this is exactly where they put it in. That this, distillation, step 6, this is where Jesus is so important. You see, Jesus of Nazareth is so important because he fully distilled. He fully connected with the unborn self. That's the cosmic Christ principle, all this stuff. Again, it's the same thing over and over. They use different jargon, they use different rhetoric, they use different framework, but it's the same thing over and over. And so that's what this distillation process is. And then coagulation is the 7th and final stage of the alchemical transformation. Chemically, coagulation is the precipitation or sublimation of the purified ferment from distillation. Psychologically, coagulation is the first sensed as a new level of awareness and self-confidence that is beyond all things. Many experience it as a permanent state of higher consciousness, the ultimate embodiment of spirit. Coagulation releases the ultima materia of the soul, the astral body, also known as the philosopher's stone. Psychologically or physiologically, this final stage is marked by the release of a fiery liquid energy that drives physical transmutation and becomes the brain ambrosia, or hormone that brings on the materialization of spirit in man. This is true atonement with the mind of God. Again, so you hear Hermetic adages, you hear New Age rhetoric, you hear ancient alchemical understandings, all of this, and the final step of coagulation. And so this article, it reads, the substance is crystallized into a solid state. Here there is the meeting between matter and spirit, inner and outer, good and evil. Again, the unity of dualities. Yes, the union of dualities. Exactly what we as Orthodox Christians have to be against, because this is fundamentally relativism. This, again, is the problem with all this stuff over and over. It's always relativistic. Again, and it's totally privileging your own experience, your own phenomenology, and then we always have to combine the dualities. Yes, because again, it's based on dualism. Whereas again, this is a big distinction with what I was talking about. We as Christians, especially Orthodox Christianity, do not believe in dualism. The opposite of God's energies do not have a positive existence. They don't have a positive existence. They're the absence of. And so this says it is at this stage where the spirit has become self-aware. It perceives itself, and it sees and understands that the inner world and the outer world are not different, but reflections of each other. Now, that can be true, that again, the sort of reflection of the inner and outer world to a degree. But this whole process, this idea of the union of dualities, and that's where you get all the hermaphroditic, the androgynous semiotics, that this stuff is relativistic. It's in opposition to everything that we would believe to be true as Orthodox Christians. And so I just described this process and how it relates to people's individual souls. Now, because this process, this alchemical process of evil that I'm trying to highlight, is occurring to every single person, right? All of us are being bombarded by these things. All of us are being bombarded by these alchemical, again, the society as the petri dish itself, moving toward, because that's what the global reset is. That's what the Great Reset is. Because to get to globalism, being that as the coagulation, being that as the final crystallization, they have to go through these transformations even in society. But in society, they're also working on the individual, the personal level. And so how then do they invert the energies? And this is where this whole process gets its energy. Literally, all this stuff comes from in the inverting of God's uncreated energies. Only God's energies, as I said, have a positive existence. All things evil are the absence of God's goodness. Satan can only distort, manipulate, and invert, yet he has tremendous power. How does he have tremendous power? I say because he's inverting these energies. His power comes from transmuting the uncreated energies of God. And so let's get into the first one. The first uncreated energy of God that I believe is being inverted at a sort of alchemical, magical, satanic inverting level in our society is love. Why do I begin with love? Because love is the mode and vehicle of the Trinity. Love is how God moves. Whether in eternity or in time, it's always in love. And so love is a really, really important one in regards to our theology, because love is ultimately the telos of all things. Telos just being a fancy Greek term for teleology, meaning the purpose or the end of all things, the end result. What is the final stage of something or the purpose of something? That's its telos. And so the telos of all things is ultimately love. The telos of creation itself was for mankind to freely choose to love God the way in which God loves him, so man choosing God through his free will can become more like God, synergized through, again, these energies. The purpose of the creation of other people, right? The purpose of having babies, true love creates life. Life itself is an uncreated energy. I didn't even get into life today. I could get into the inversion of life and global climate change and abortion and how, again, they invert the concept of life and people flock to it and they totally perform its evil agenda. But how is love being inverted in our society? I say the number one way that love is being inverted is first through passionate eros. That love, true love, is well beyond eroticism. Eroticism surely exists within the context of romantic love with a particular person. But as we see society focus more and more on erotic love, we see the dissolution of the familial love. We see the dissolution of the nuclear family. We see love outside the context of sex almost being demonized in our society. That somehow this is a control of other people, right? You're not letting them fully express themselves, right? These 8-year-old kids, no, they're actually self-consciously and sexually aware, and they're choosing all these different things. And you, and being so bigoted, your mom and dad, you're not letting them be their true selves. And therefore, we're going to take your kids from you, as they do in Canada, and I'm sure they're going to do here fairly quickly. So love has now gone from true love, which again is the purpose and telos of all things. All things is true love. The purpose of a man is ultimately, again, whether it be the spiritual leader, the protector, the provider, that comes in the context of love for something outside yourself. And this is the big one because love, true love, is selfless. If the Trinity moves and its mode of existence is true love, it's always in a selfless way. Christ dying on the cross, defeating death, becoming incarnate, taking on the detritus, the sort of degraded forms of the human body, does it in love. That you couldn't be more self-sacrificial than Christ and the crucifixion. And so we then, as people, if you engage in any sort of authentic love, it has to have some sort of self-sacrificial dimension, whether that's with your parents, whether that's with your grandparents, whether that's with your romantic partner, whether that's with your children. It's all a sort of self-sacrifice. And that's how you know it's true love. It's true love. But this true love, again, has been eroticized in our society, inverting it, and that power is so strong because I would say this love, this eroticism is one of the most fundamental and strong passions within mankind. And so the evil one, again, performing a sort of alchemical magic on society itself, has subverted God's love, true love, for an erotic passion in which you are now controllable by. See, previously, a true love, you can't be controlled. If you truly love like your nation, your religion, your family, those are the things that you will you'll self-sacrifice for, that you will die for. You will die for those things. But again, because of its inversion now, and it's becoming more and more and more and more selfish, right? Instead of being selfless, now love is all about the self. It's all about becoming Lucifer. It's all about loving pridefully yourself over all things. And so it's only about oneself. It's only about oneself. And that passionate eros now allows you to be controlled, as opposed to true love not allowing you to be controlled. True love for God, true love for your family, true love for your nation means you will die for it. You can't be controlled. You can't be controlled. But again, the subversion of it now means your love is tied to pornography. It's tied to immediate pleasure. It's tied to the attention of men or the attention of women. Now you're a slave. You're a slave in the name of love, in the name of God's uncreated energy, in the name of God's uncreated energy. And the other one is that love has boundaries. For true love to exist, it has to have boundaries. True love has to exist with honesty, right? Honesty is a boundary. Honesty, again, is the difference between truth and falsehood. True love is about the well-beings of others. True love, if you know that the majority of people who become transgender, especially children before puberty, have a almost 50% likelihood of suiciding themselves, your true love would say, no, Jimmy, no, Susan, I love you too much to allow you to go down this path. I love you too much. I have boundaries. I have distinctions and delineations. We can't do this because I care about you. But again, because love now is erotic and love is always about self-service. Well, Jimmy, oh my gosh, if you become the trans kid in your class, that is so empowering. And I'm going to be like such the cool mother, and I'm going to be so progressive, and I'm going to show everybody else like how it should be done. No. And so this whole idea that love is love, that is the framework, that's the rhetoric, that's the religious incantation, that is the magical alchemical sublimation of love having no boundaries whatsoever. And as soon as it has no boundaries, it has no direction other than one's self. And so that's where we exist now, that love is all about absolute tolerance. Love is love. There is no distinctions. There are no demarcations to be made. That love isn't about familial love. It's not about agape love. It's not about philo love. It's not about these things. It's about eroticism. It's about erotic love. And so erotic love that has no boundaries, and then love is all about self-service. That love is no longer self-sacrificial. Love in the uncreated energy of God is always going to be self-sacrificial. And so that's the first one then, is love, the inversion of love. The second inverted energy, I would say, is logic and reason. This is the one that I wrote down. And then there's so many I could have went into. Like I said, I could have went into life and death. I haven't even touched that one. And so logic and reason is... So first of all, to even talk about logic and reason, we have to differentiate what those are, right? You ask most people what's the difference between logic and reason, they're not going to really know. The difference between logic and reason is really, again, there's different definitions, but really it comes down to logic being an objective set of categories outside oneself. Logic is out here. Reason really defines what a rational capacity within mankind. So reason, if we're going to define it, is really about an internal capacity. It's an internal faculty. Logic is something that we engage with, but logic exists out here. The laws of logic. Laws exist out here. Logic exists out here. Reason exists in here. And so you use your rational capacity and your rational faculty in conjunction with the observation of logic and its logical principles and laws. So logic and reason are the uncreated energies of God that are mechanisms, us being made in the image of God, that allows us to perceive truth, which ultimately is Jesus Christ. He is the truth, ultimately, right? So it's ultimately Jesus Christ who is the truth. But what we're seeing and how this energy is being subverted, it's being sublimated into something else, is that people in the name, like logic being this exterior categories of human understanding, is now being subverted into the globalist narrative. The World Health Organization, the CDC, St. Dr. Fauci, right? Dr. Bill Gates. Obviously, he's not a doctor, but people listen to him as if he is one. That I would say how logic and reason, the true energies of God, are being subverted is through, again, using sort of logical and rational rhetoric, but redefining it in terms of the globalist narrative. And so this leads to people losing the internal faculty of reason. The internal faculty of reason, they end up losing that, because what happens in exchange of being a critical thinker, because to be a critical thinker, you have to have the rational capacity in conjunction with trying to use logic, that all they can think of is the hive mind. The only thing they can do is logic is the acquiescence to the global narrative, and then my rational capacity is how I become subservient to that and how I criticize people who aren't as subservient as I am. And this is an energetic process. Again, this is the sort of inversion of God's energies. And so the objective truth is the truth that is given by the narrative. The internal rational component is how I can submit to that being the case. And I recently just watched, when I was eating lunch earlier today, I just recently clicked on a Fleckus Talks. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's a conservative, more of a popular sort of conservative YouTube channel guy. But he just goes up and asks people questions. And he was going to the Pride demonstration at like Washington Square or something in New York. And he was going up to people who had masks on. Again, this is a sunny day. It's very hot out. And he was asking them if they got vaccinated. And if they did, why are they still wearing masks? And it was incredibly insightful to what, again, I'm trying to highlight with this logic and reason and the inversion of them in regards to God's energy, in regards to us using them in the correct way, being made in the image of God. These people, when he would ask them, oh, okay, great, what are you doing here? Okay, cool. I was just curious, have you already been vaccinated? Oh, and again, they were so happy to say, yeah, I'm vaccinated. Yeah, I'm moral. I care about others. I'm vaccinated. And then he would say, oh, okay, well, why are you still wearing the mask? And they, like one girl said, well, next question. And he's like, well, what's your reason? What's your logic for wearing the mask? Next question. I don't really have one. Again, even the people who had a reason, he would say, well, it's for me to feel safe. Okay, and then he'd say, well, sir, you are wearing a cloth mask. You know that, the cloth mask isn't as efficacious as an N95 mask, and it doesn't really stop anything. He goes, yeah, I know. I know. It doesn't really stop anything, but it makes me feel better. And I'm just making sure that I don't infect anybody else who's immunologically impaired. And it's like, but I thought you're vaccinated, so that means you wouldn't be able to transmit it, right? And again, it's a total breakdown of one's ability to reason. I mean, it was literally like 6 or 7 people that had been vaccinated that were wearing masks outside. And when asked why you're wearing a mask outside after being vaccinated, they could give no real reason. All they could appeal to was the same rhetoric that the media gives them, because the inversion of these energies of God has led to people, again, attaining the hive mind. It's a sort of magical alchemical process. Slowly but surely. We talk about the NPCs. That's what it is. It's an inversion of logic and reason to the point where people literally lose the critical functions within their own mind. And I've talked about this before when I did a stream on Protestantism and the Spirit of Capitalism by Max Weber, the very important German sociologist, Max Weber, and how he talked about spheres of rationalization. And so one of the things he was talking about is going to be the breakdown of an overarching reason or logic, because within the post-industrial Europe, the coming of, post-Enlightenment, we're talking about the mid to late 1800s. He said, well, what's going to happen is people are just going to develop spheres of reason, spheres of rationality for one thing, and then one thing over here, and then one thing over here, and then one thing over here. And it's not going to be consistent. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We're exactly seeing this, where people's rational capacities, it's almost mind-numbing. Like they don't have anything there. They don't have anything there. And so, as I said before, Google it yourself if you think I'm making this up. Logic and reason has been deemed bigoted. It's deemed bigoted by some of these people. And I saw it was like a black PhD at the University of Chicago. University of Chicago, of course, Rockefeller funded, but it's supposed to be one of the better universities in America, right? The University of Chicago. And yet you have a black female PhD literally arguing that the emphasis on logic and reason and consistency is part of white supremacy. And this has also been rationed. I think it's in Portland or somewhere, where they say that black people are by definition at a disadvantage when it comes to mathematics compared to white people and, I guess, Asians. But it's like, well, how do Asians get in there if it's white supremacy? I guess it's because of the lack of melanin. I don't know. But there's literally rhetoric, again, all coming from the critical theorists and all that different stuff, that logic and reason is bigoted. Logic and reason is used for white supremacy. And so, like I said, people's rational minds have been fractured to such a degree that I really think that people just live in their mind. Inside their mind it's a hall of mirrors. And so, again, I do recommend watching like Fleckus Talk's most recent video where he asked these people, again, why are you wearing a mask if you're vaccinated? Because you can see the fractured mind. There's nothing there. Again, and they're all there for a pride parade, which again shows you the degeneracy of the evil and how it totally takes the image of God out of these people, right? The image of God tells you are a critical thinker. You can engage in logic. You're supposed to be rational. This is how we become more like God. This is how we engage with God directly. And these people's minds are absolutely fractured. It's absolutely fractured. And so the next one that I want to get into is language and numbers. Language and numbers. I talked about this when I began the stream, and that Christ is the Alpha and the Omega, the eternal Word of God. That language and magic is extremely, extremely important, just as anything else. And that magic is this way in which the wizard works, right? Even when you think of shamanism, shamanism is all about language and the ability for sounds. Sounds have visible structure in the ayahuasca cults. So if you get into an ayahuasca session, and I think your mate Tom even talked about being able to see these things, that a shaman who has great skill, that he can, when the tribe engages in the ayahuasca ceremony, that he can sing these icaros, that he can say these words, these incantations, and you can see them. They're like arrows. They're visible things that all, again, it's objective to the whole tribe, to the whole party. They can see what he's saying, right? That phrase actually takes on a new meaning, and that you can see what they're saying. And that, again, the shaman, his magical powers is tied to his use of language. It's tied to his use of language. Same thing is true with wizards. Same thing is true with witches. Again, that's why, what is a magical spell? What is a magical spell? Well, according to, listen to somebody like Alan Moore, again, another comic book writer. I mentioned Grant Morris in regard to sigil magic. Well, Alan Moore, he always talked about what magic is, and that magic is language itself. It's the manipulation of words. It's the manipulation of meaning. And that what a magic spell is just to spell. And what a grimoire is, which is a book of magical spells, is really just another word for grammar, a grammar book. And so magic spells, magical language, ritual language It's believed that these things are efficacious, that somehow when man uses language, he's participating in something divine. And so again, where does the energy for the efficacy of these rituals come from? I say it's literally the divine energy of God. That's why you will condemn your soul to hell by practicing magic, because you are subverting and inverting the gift, the uncreated gift that we are given by God, the Holy Trinity. You are subverting that for your own purposes. And so even though it's so subtle, maybe you are perceived to be a good person here or there, but it is a major transgression against God. It took me a minute again to try to put these dots together, but the major transgression against God is because you're subverting his energies. You're subverting his energies. And so, again, God creates through speaking. So does the magician. So does the law of attraction. Speak what you want into existence, right? But we as Christians must be subservient to God's will. And so what does, again, and highlighting this importance of language, what does God give Adam the ability to do? Name the animals. Because if you can name something, you have a sense of dominion over it. You have a sense of dominion over it. This is also the theology of why the Hebrews don't want to say the name Yahweh. Because they, again, through various theories, they believe this thing to also be true, that language and our ability to participate in language gives us some sort of conceptual power to take hold of things in the world. That somehow we can have dominion and grasp things in the world through this process of language. This is divine. This is true, again, in most world religions. And so Adam named the animals. The way we communicate through God is through his uncreated energy of language. That's what prayer is. That's, again, confession. Confession is putting your sins into language to a degree. Repenting, telling the priest, telling your community, telling God, using his uncreated energies to communicate, which builds communion, which builds community. And so we can see then the attack on language, even in today's society, it's anti-community. They want to isolate us. Satan is the divider, right? The separator. And so we look at COVID-19 and the 2020 pandemic and how this is all separate us further and further. And so we have less and less communion, which means we have less and less community, which means our communication between each other has become lesser and lesser as well as a result. And so incantations, magical spells, ritual language, sigil magic, gematria, these have real power to them. And that power comes from the subversion of God's uncreated energy of language and numbers. And so magical language is the inversion of the word, like I said earlier. And it's ultimately the submission of God's uncreated. You're using God's uncreated energy, not for his glory, not for the purposes he gave it to you, but for you to subvert it for your own desires. And the thing is, this stuff really works. Like I tried to tell you, when I did sigil magic, the stuff actually works. Stuff actually works. And that's what's scary. And that's why then the Bible telling you, oh, don't do magic. Do not perform magic, that you will condemn your soul to hell. Why? Because it's real. It's absolutely real. It's not a joke whatsoever. And so, like I said earlier, the wizard and the magician is a subtle inversion of Christ and a sort of Christ-like archetype. Now, the next one I want to get into is the inversion of the uncreated light. Right? When we talk about the uncreated energies of God, we also talk about the taboric light. That light itself, the light of Christ, is uncreated. And that when Christ revealed himself on Mount Tabor, that he revealed his divinity. And so from a Christian context, we understand that somehow divinity, when perceived, is perceived as light, some type of uncreated light. And so the Taboric light reveals the divinity within. We even see this with Moses when he talks with the I Am. When he comes down from Mount Zion, he's glowing. He's glowing with light. We as Orthodox Christians believe that the saints that are living right now on earth, that if you were to go meet them, they would also be glowing because they have all these uncreated energies more present within themselves than you or I would. You know, we look kind of dull compared to them. And so darkness, theologically, cannot exist in the presence of divine light, right? Light, there is no darkness in the Taboric light. There is no darkness in the uncreated light of God. But how is this then subverted? How is this then inverted for magical or evil purposes? And I say that how we see it is that it turns into God's uncreated light becomes into the false light of Lucifer. And what do I mean by that? That the false light of Lucifer redirects attention back to darkness. And so this is what the media, industrial, military complex is actually all about. It's a Luciferian process of redirection. It's a false light. So for example, they'll tell you little pieces of truth, but the truth that they're telling you about themselves, they're attributing it to somebody else. So think about Russia collusion. Okay, again, you know my criticisms of Trump, so it's not like I'm a big Trump supporter here, but the uncreated or the Luciferian redirection of light is to confess the things that you are actually doing, but say somebody else is doing them. So then you direct everybody's moral attention to this other person because they think they're doing all these things. So you've sort of confessed the truth, but you lied about who did it. And so there's like a little bit of light there. This is what I'm calling the Luciferian light. There's light in the sense, yes, Hillary Clinton, whatever they were using the intelligence agencies. They were spying with the NSA. They were doing all these different things. That the FBI is corrupt. The CIA is corrupt. They all work for, entities and powers that certainly aren't the people of the United States of America. And so then they just equate, Donald Trump's doing all these things, and they say what they're doing. They'll literally confess what they're doing about, but they'll say that somebody else is doing it. And that is, again, it's a blinding light. It's a blinding light. And this is the magical subversion. This is the magical subversion of it all, because in a way, they give you a little bit of truth and you become blinded by it. Look what happened in America. We literally had a faux election. We had Joe Biden, who is he's not even mentally competent to do a crossword puzzle. And yet he's the president. Of course he's not. We all know that, it's a shadow we're run by a shadow government right now. We know that. But yes, gaslighting. Panel said gaslighting. It's a very similar thing, but the Luciferian faux light presents a little bit of truth, but it redirects all the attention away from actual darkness. And so the black light of Lucifer does not emanate and destroy the darkness. It obfuscates the darkness, right? So, for example, if you play hide and seek at night, one of the best places to hide is right behind a light, because people looking at that light cannot see behind that light. And that's kind of the metaphor of sort of how Lucifer inverts God's uncreated light, the Taboric light, the light that destroys all darkness, the light in which evil cannot be in the presence of, also known as the river of fire, right? This is God's river of fire, that for those who want to be purified by the fire is grace. For those who do not want to let go of their sins and all that detritus, the fire burns. And this is what hellfire is. It's God's eternal love that burns those who can't deal with it, who can't let go. And so the Russia collusion story, again, is just one quick example. COVID, admitting about the Wuhan lab theory, and now they're coming out with the Delta virus. And again, it's another form of gaslighting. They'll tell you, oh yeah, that's kind of true, but now we're going to do the whole process over again. You better listen to us. And the thing is, many people will. How is this happening? Because it's an inversion of God's energies. They're literally performing an alchemical, magical spell on people. And the only way to maintain one's clarity of vision is to be in contact with Christ, because Christ will give the blind sight. Right? I did a whole stream on how Christ gives sight to the blind. The problem with the Luciferian light, he blinds those who can see. Right? The Luciferian light is blinding. The point is for you to not see. The point is for you to obfuscate the truth. Christ's light reveals. It actually gives you sight. You can see good and evil better. So So all this stuff, again, is how God's uncreated light is subverted and distorted and inverted for a sort of magical, transformative, alchemical process in our own society, which then is also reflective of people's souls. Because as you believe in these lies, you're literally transforming your own soul. Your own soul is getting darker and darker and darker. The uncreated light of Christ is actually leaving, it's becoming darkened, tainted, dirtied in your own vessel, your own body. Your own body. Literally, God's light is being darkened in yourself every time you believe in these Luciferian gaslighting lies, the inversions of light, the inversions of truth. And so the next one, the next inverted, uncreated energy of God I want to get into is beauty. Beauty is a real big one. Beauty, the good, the true, and the beautiful, the Platonic Trinity, if you will. And so beauty is the physical and materialistic expression of God's metaphysical harmony, order, and proportions, right? I've talked about aesthetics before, and that aesthetics is an objective field, right? Beauty has objective principles. Proportion is one of them. Harmony and order are aspects which we can recognize. We can recognize beauty. And so, beauty then is the visible expression of the good. Beauty is the visible expression of the good. And so I started to think about, again, how I've already described love being inverted and it's become overly eroticized, that we've lost true love in the favor of erotic love. But in regards to God's uncreated energy of beauty, the first thing I thought of, and you've heard me say this before, is the scarification of beauty. Is that beauty standards are returning more and more to a sort of tribal setting. That look at your average feminist. Look at how she dresses. You know, she's probably overweight, but if she's not, you know, the purple hair, the freaking bull hook on her nose, you know, the piercings, the tattoos. These are scarifications of the created body that God made for you. The created vessel God made for you. Where do tattoos most commonly occur? Tribal societies. Where do piercings most commonly occur? Obviously, tribal societies. You know, they'll put a damn twig through their nose. So these things, in my opinion, are a movement away from the aesthetics and the objective forms of beauty that were developed by the Greeks and was enmeshed with Christianity in the early days, that we had a beautiful aesthetic. A beautiful aesthetic. I mean, that's where Orthodoxy still has that beauty. Go into a really beautiful Orthodox church. You can feel the aesthetic. You can feel the beauty. You can sense the good. You can sense how good and divinity is expressed through physical material means that we identify as beautiful. And this is energetic, right? This gives you energy. This is an energetic process. And so what's funny, I was again talking with somebody privately, and we were talking about, she was mentioning the beauty standards are getting higher and higher for women. And so it's interesting that when we start looking at beauty in regards to female beauty or things like that in society, because obviously beauty isn't as a dominant characteristic for men as it is for a woman. And so we were talking about the beauty standards of women nowadays and how beauty standards are getting higher and higher and higher, but at the same time, people are getting uglier and uglier and uglier, right? I mean, I believe this to be true, that if you go into the high school right now and you got all the girls together and took them outside and looked at them, I would say, unfortunately, it seems like, again, I could be totally wrong, but ugliness is becoming more and more predominant. The way they dress, the way they look, the way they fix themselves or lack of, it's like they're becoming uglier and uglier and uglier. Now, then look back 70 years. Grab all the women in the high school and take them outside and look at them. The way they're fit, they're more feminine, they're more aesthetic, they're more polite, all these different things. You're like, wow, they're much more attractive. There's much more beautiful characteristics to these women than these women over here. They got a big, tattoo on their thigh or this or that. So the scarification of beauty that people are getting uglier and uglier, but at the same time, the beauty standard is getting higher and higher and higher. And so how does this work with this inversion of the uncreated energy of beauty, of God's uncreated energy of beauty? I would say that the exaggeration of God's natural beauty. See, that women are objectively, it's just objective, it's a fact. Women are better to look at, right? Even women are attracted to a woman with nice breasts, nice thighs, nice hips, nice butt, like a small waist. There's something objectively beautiful about that, whether you're a red-blooded man or you're just a straight woman. There's something to be appreciated by that. There's an aesthetic to the female body that the man doesn't have. And so the exaggeration of these characteristics by somebody like a Kim Kardashian, with the lips exaggerated, the breast and the hips exaggerated compared to the small waist, totally exaggerated. What does this do? Well, this exaggerates the characteristics that God naturally created for women, right? Look, again, compared to even the more seductive, potentially degenerate, how you look at it, Greek sculptures of female beauty, of Diana and all these different Greek goddesses. Well, it's all about the natural aesthetic, right? It wasn't about this exaggerated form. Now, female beauty is so exaggerated that it's so artificial that a man can attain the same look. And that is the alchemical, magical inversion of this energy, of beauty itself. That by the emphasis on women wanting to be more beautiful and compete with each other, getting all these artificial surgeries done, they've allowed for themselves and the standard of beauty itself to become entirely artificial. And because the standard of beauty now is entirely artificial, some twinky little skinny man can go have all these surgeries done and he looks like Kim Kardashian. And you wouldn't even be able to know the difference unless he told you. Because all these sexual features, the lips, the breast, the thighs, the hips, the waist, these things that men consciously or subconsciously look at as sexual features, they've all been exaggerated to such a degree that you can't even notice the actual natural female aesthetic anymore. Because that would actually differentiate, right? If the beauty standard was still so focused on natural female beauty, well, then some twinky little, transgender wouldn't be able to look exactly like that. It's just not the same. But because everything has become exaggerated, it's become so modified. Now anybody can look like a beautiful woman, at least according to modern standards. And so it's so funny then, right? How funny is it that in the 21st century, it's like women are getting uglier and the beauty standards getting higher, and in so doing, more men can become these beautiful, top-notch women. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's a total inversion of God's energy and a manipulation of how we perceive these things in the world. Right? It's crazy. It's crazy. So female beauty, like I said, has become so artificial. Men can get surgery and look just as good. And God's natural female proportions have become so greatly exaggerated. Now they're imbalanced. Why is that important? Because the definition of aesthetics is balance. The definition of beauty regarding to sort of the field of aesthetics is harmony, is order, is proportion. And so what we're getting now with the Kim Kardashians is something that's not proportional anymore, right? Yes, it's extreme. Like it can be very seductive because the sexual features are so pronounced, but it's exaggerated and it's imbalanced now. So it's no longer actually in the sort of realm of God's uncreated energy of beauty because it's imbalanced. That God's true definition of beauty is all about balance. It's all about proportion, and it's all about harmony. And so, again, this is just another way in which beauty is being alchemically subverted and sublimated into something it's not. And so the next one and the last one here, because I really got to get going here pretty soon, is the moral good. The moral good. And that to follow Christ, sons would be divided from their fathers, right? So Christ talks about how he didn't come to unite. He didn't come to unite. That that he said that, he would cause tension between father and son, between daughter and mother. And so how do I understand this related to the moral good? Well, to follow God, as Christ even put in the Gospels, as he said to the disciples, he was going to cause tension within the world. That Christ's message, though it was to save anybody who followed his teaching, who followed him, who took up their cross, yes, his salvation is for everybody, but obviously not everybody's going to choose it because of the free will. And so it's therefore to be moral in the Christian context is extremely difficult. You have to take up one's cross. This means it's a lifetime effort. It takes tons of time. And like I said, it's not easy. It's very difficult. So every day you're working on yourself. Every day you're repenting. Every day you're trying to get better. And in so doing and trying to follow God's message, there's many people who aren't going to accept it. You're going to be persecuted by the world, as he says, right? And so this is always going to be the case. And this is to follow the true moral good, right? The true moral good of the uncreated energy of God is to follow Christ and his teaching and his message, to be more like Christ. But to be more like Christ, again, is extremely difficult. It's extremely time-consuming. And you're going to cause friction in the world. And so how is this inverted then? How is the moral good of Christ's energy inverted? Well, today, morality is the submission to the inverted globalist agenda. It's about acquiescence to the narrative, to the globalist rhetoric. If I want to show how moral I am, I post a black square on Instagram. That's all I got to do. You post on Instagram, so it's easy, it's immediate, and now I cause no tension, right? Actually, I alleviate tension in my life. I alleviate it, right? So think about last summer when they're doing the black square nonsense. I can show how moral I am. All I have to do is post something online. I don't have to do anything in my life. I don't have to be a good person. I can just post a square, and now that alleviates me from further tension in the world. That's the exact opposite of what Christ's message is in regards to how we become and act morally. That to act morally, it's not going to be any of those things. And so now now we're finally leaving Pride Month in June, and what do these corporations do? The exact same thing. We're moral because we support prideful sin. And therefore we put gay colors on every single product and every corporate logo, and therefore we're more moral, right? That because morality redefined in this spirit of Antichrist in this contemporary period, it's all about obfuscation, right? These corporations want you dead, and at the same time, they throw on a pride flag, and now people clap like trained seals about how moral they are. The same people who back in 2008 were protesting Wall Street, now are all in favor of it because Wall Street's just as gay as you are. Now, apparently the NFL, I don't know if you saw that, football's gay, and so most of you probably already knew that. So today's morality then is a submission to the overarching narrative. This is how you are moral. There's nothing you have to do in the world other than accept the transgression of boundaries. You have to accept the narrative. You have to promote the narrative. And if you criticize the narrative, now you're amoral. Or rather not amoral, you're immoral. You're not amoral, you're immoral. And so you're immoral now if you don't accept the globalist agenda because they care about you, right? Global climate change, we care about you. We really care about you. No. And so what's funny then is for Christ and his message is even though you are going to be divided from your parents potentially, you are going to have a lot of friction in the world. In fact, you're most likely going to be persecuted by the world. What does he tell us to do? Pray for your enemies. Have mercy on your enemies. Lord, have mercy on them, for they know not what they do. This is how we follow the archetype of Christ. But in this faux form, this inverted energy of morality, this inversion of morality that we now see that's been, again, a sort of alchemical process, that there is no mercy, that in the name of morality, in the name of tolerance, it's okay to kill, persecute, destroy the lives of anybody who doesn't agree with you. That is the lack of mercy. That's the exact opposite. And so again, you can see how it's been inverted. But because, again, they're inverting an uncreated energy of God, it's an energetic process. People engage in it because it gives them energy. It gives them energy to make them feel moral and persecute their Christian grandfather. Who knows who it is. It gives them energy. It gives them power. It's a sort of alchemical process. And so death, harm, and persecution is justified for the moral good. Think about that. In the name of intolerance and the name of the global moral good, it's okay to dox, kill, shoot, rape, all this different stuff, the people that don't agree with you, the people who don't submit to the globalist rhetoric. That's unbelievable. Unbelievable, right? But at the same time, you better believe it because it's here right now. It's not going away. And so it's just crazy. It's just crazy what we are up against. And again, this phenomenon, as I try to highlight, the inversion of God's energies, the inversions of God's energies. And so this moral good, this is the scariest one, I think, because I think the moral good energy, the inversion of the moral good energy and the inversion of the love energy are really, really, really pernicious, because the inversion of the love, meaning getting everybody attached to erotic love and therefore allowing them to be controlled, because erotic love is not true love. True love is self-sacrificial, and you will die for what you love, your family, your nation, your God. Erotic love is a total imbalance, and it allows you to be controlled. So now we get all these people attached to their fetish, their fur babies, they're homosexuals, they're transgenders, they're pedophiles, whatever it is, you get people attached to their sexual fetish, and then you get them believing that their attachment to sin is actually a moral good. And so it's a double whammy. I've talked about the inversion of light. I've talked about the beauty. I've talked about language and numbers, logic and reason. But it's the inversion of love and the inversion of the moral good that I think are the most pernicious, because you get somebody to be attached to their sexual fetish, which is one of the deepest energetic processes, psychological processes in mankind, is sex. You get them to become attached to that, and then you get them to feel moral by defending it and by persecuting anybody who actually promotes true morality. True morality. And so when you get a bunch of these foot soldiers, which is essentially what they are, the NPC is a foot soldier for the globalist, these people will ultimately kill you. I mean, it's a real game. There's real money on the table here, right? It is for all the chips, so to say. So that pretty much concludes, again, today's stream on the alchemy of evil, magical theories, and the inversion of God's energies. Again, we talked about the alchemy of evil. We talked about the 7 stages of the alchemical transformation and how this relates both to the individual soul and to society as a whole. Then we talked about the efficacy of magic itself and how magic has to be working off some type of energetic process, of which I'm trying to identify it as the uncreated energies of God, and that all magic, all rituals, all inversion, all wizardry, all alchemy is a form of sublimating, transforming, transmutating the energies of God, the uncreated energies of God. And in so doing, we've seen the inversion of love go from true love to passionate eroticism, in which people are attached to. We see logic and reason, logic being the exterior objective qualities of laws and categories, reason being an internal rational function or capability within the human mind, both of which are uncreated energies of God. We see both of those being inverted, and now people, logic, the objective categories outside, are now being defined by the globalists, the global hive mind, and because these people are ultimately programmed, they've lost their ability for internal reason. There is no overarching rational capacity, and therefore their minds are sort of like a fractured hall of mirrors, and that reason now is just, how can I acquiesce and submit to the overarching objective logical narrative that they get from the propaganda. And so then we got into language and numbers, halgematria, sigil magic, magical incantations, magical language, All this stuff is an inversion of God's uncreated energy of language itself, because language itself is, again, extremely powerful. It's how you and I are made in the image of God. It's how we actually can create. That language is extremely, extremely fundamental, even in the Orthodox worldview. This is why what you say matters. What you say absolutely matters. And it matters so much that you can say certain things and you can actually cause and get non-physical spirits, demons, to work on your behalf, that you have that capacity. Language is that powerful. And that's how magic then inverts the uncreated energy of language and numbers. That gematria is a form of magic, because numbers themselves are uncreated energies. That we engage in numbers because we are made in the image of God. And then we talked about how light, the uncreated light of Christ, the transformative light, the light which heals the blind, gives sight to the blind, is another inversion of Lucifer and Lucifer's false light, and how Lucifer gives a faux form of light. And that faux form of light actually blinds people. And so it's the gaslighting. It's to confess one's sins but blame it on somebody else, so the entire focus is on this other person, which is a lie. They didn't do these things, but you're able to direct all that attention. And so Lucifer's light always obfuscates darkness. It always obfuscates darkness. And then we talked about beauty and how beauty standards have been inverted, and how beauty standards have been on the attack. That is no longer about proportion, order, and harmony. We've talked about the scarification of people's bodies and how this is deemed beautiful, but really this is moving back to a tribal aesthetic, and how women have perceivably gotten uglier and over time, and at the same time, beauty standards have gotten higher, and as those beauty standards have gotten higher, that's made women more artificial, and as women become more artificial, it allows men to play that same game, and so now you have all these lady boys and transgenders that look just as good as a Kim Kardashian, and they'd have to tell you that they have a penis, because you wouldn't even know. You wouldn't even know. Or they probably had surgery, and so it's like, how do you even know anymore? How do you even know? It's all a subversion. It's all an inversion of God's energy. And then the last one was the moral good, and how the moral good, morality itself, what Christ said you will be persecuted against, has been you'll be persecuted against by being moral and following and taking up your cross and following Christ. That now morality is just the globalist narrative. And if you are against that narrative, you are the immoral one. And in the name of morality, in the name of tolerance, you can be excommunicated. You can be killed. You can be persecuted. They can destroy you and your family. I saw one woman on Twitter actually advocate taking the white nationalists and taking their kids from them and raping their kids and putting them in concentration camps. And they thought this was funny. And so it's not. This is a real thing going on. We're in the midst of a real spiritual warfare, and so I hope today's stream actually provided some sort of clarity and connected some type of dots. So that concludes today's stream. Let me read some super chats. If you got any super chats, feel free to shoot them in here. Again, I preferably use the Streamlabs link. If you'd like to throw me some shekels for appreciation, I would greatly, greatly appreciate that. If you would. If you'd like to become a website member, please use this link. It's for $5 a month. Again, you can have access to exclusive video content, putting up videos all the time there. A great way to, again, help support Church of the Eternal Logos. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it if you become a website member. Or if you'd be interested in setting up a one-on-one session, you can do so with this link right here as I'm posting it in the live chat. So again, if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to super chat those in right now. I'll answer those before I hop off here for, again, my theology class tonight. So looks like first super chat comes from Joshua Schmidt. He threw a $9.99. Thank you very much, Joshua. He said, "Put on your wizard hats and bust out a cauldron of good brew. It's alchemy time." Sponsored by LARP Gang. Well, I appreciate that, Joshua Schmidt. Thank you so much, brother, for your $9.99 contribution. I do hope everybody had at least their thinking cap on. But if you have a wizard, if you have your Gandalf wizard cap or your Merlin wizard hat. That will work as well. So thank you so much, Joshua Schmidt, for the $9.99. Again, I greatly appreciate it, brother. Luchador1764, thank you very much, brother, for supporting another stream. He threw in $5 and said, "What's up with the Church of the Genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece, Greek Old Calendarists, generally speaking? Proceed with caution or no?" I am not I'm not an expert on the Greek Old Calendarist. So I, unfortunately, am not the best person to ask this question, Luchador1764. I'm much more familiar with the Greek church here in America as being quite problematic. In regards to the Greek Old Calendarist, generally speaking, I am not too familiar with their activities. I know that there's a lot of problems going on in Greece. Obviously, the Patriarch Bartholomew is part of the New World Order. He's an ecumenicist. He's certainly, I would consider, leading many people to a form of apostasy in regards to his teachings and his beliefs and him wanting to be reunited with the Vatican, his participation in ecumenical forums and gatherings. There's a lot of strange stuff going on in Greece. So I would generally proceed with caution. But again, our great Father Peter Hears is over in Greece, and I'm sure he is surrounded by incredibly faithful, traditional, wonderful Orthodox men and women. So, we can highlight general trends, but it's always going to be a parish by parish basis of how orthodoxy is maintained. I think again the best thing to do is learn the theology. Learn Orthodox theology so you can defend it and live your life as best you can. And when you encounter the church, because the problem is for the Orthodox world is too many cradles can't see the problems. And so this is where you get a sort of overzealous rhetoric for converts, which can be true. I mean, I've seen it myself. The overzealousness of converts certainly can be a problem. But the zealousy that leads to one actually knowing the faith, maintaining the faith, trying to preserve the faith, defend the faith with apologetics, I think these are crucial. These are crucial because I think what we're seeing right now is for a lot of cradles, they just don't know the faith. There's nothing there for them to ultimately defend, protect, and uphold. So I think our best bet is to make sure we learn the faith, we know the theology, and so as we move forward into the 21st century even further, we can defend what is true and what is right. So, yeah. So thank you again, Luchador 1764 for the super chat. I greatly appreciate that. And Joshua Schmidt, thank you very, very much, brother, for the $9.99. It looks like that's all the super chats we have for tonight. So I am going to hop off here and post again. If you guys want to be part of the theology course led by Subdeacon Mark and helped with by myself, that link will be posted at the Telegram page, my group chat Telegram page. So if you would like to be a part of that, you can do that with this link right here. All those links will be provided. Again, thank you very much, everyone, for the support. Thank you, Luchador1764. Thank you, Joshua Schmidt. Please smash that like, everybody. Smash that like. And I will be back. I will be back Friday with another stream. Hopefully it's another banger, and you guys will like it. But until then, take it easy. Enjoy yourselves. Make sure you're praying. Do not stop praying. And I will see you all next time.